Okay, we are going to finish up here. This is going to be a very short segment. And here we're talking about public safety, something that's very important in relationship of these medicines that can control diseases, but can also have many serious side effects. So, through the FDA approval process, it's quite thorough. Even so, it's impossible to fully prove that a drug is safe for use. So there have been drugs that have gone through the clinical trials that we've talked about, human clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, been accepted to go onto the market. Out of the market, phase 4 is done, and yet still significant side effects has been indicated. Another thing that should be noted is the FDA has several options if it determines that a marketed drug present a risk of illness, injury, or gross consumer deception. So they do this by seeking an injunction that prevents the manufacturer from distributing the drug. It may seize the drug, or it may issue a recall of the drug or a certain lot of the drug. So this is under the discretion of the Federal Food and Drug Administration. So what is the process of a recall? So when we talk about recalls, it is to um, with a few exceptions, voluntary on the part of manufacturers. However, once the FDA requests a manufacturer to recall a particular product, there's a lot of pressure to do so. And so most of the time it does. So the FDA may issue the following recalls. It's called a class 1, where there's a strong likelihood that a product will cause serious adverse effect or death. There could be a class 2, where a product may cause temporary but reversible adverse effect, or in which there is a likelihood of a serious adverse effect. Or 3, where a product is not likely to cause an adverse effect. Okay, so a class 1 is the one in which there's usually a recall of that particular medication. But in most cases, just to be safe, many of the manufacturers will go ahead and recall all of their drugs. So what is a recall process? A lot of times, even though a product may be on the market, physicians and other health professionals begin to report certain adverse effects. So the FDA received enough reports of adverse effects or misbranding that it decides the product is a threat to the public health. And if so, it issues a recall, class 1, class 2, class 3. So the manufacturer agrees to recall. The consumers are contacted. The pharmacies will go ahead and remove that particular medication off of their shelves and inform customers of that particular medication. And once the strategy is finalized, the manufacturer contacts the consumers by the whatever methods is available via the computer, through the mail, and it must be very specific. The product name, size, the lot number, the code, serial number, the reason for the recall, the hazards that may be involved, right, and instructions to what to do with the products. And then that particular recall is listed publicly in what's called the FDA enforcement report. Right, so those are some of the things that you should be familiar with. Also, before we leave this particular segment, I want you to be familiar with certain definitions. There's 3 definitions that you should be familiar with in relationship to this particular chapter: drug regulation and control, adverse effect, injunction, and recall. So, adverse effect, the unintentional side effect of a medication that is negative or in some way injurious to the patient's health. Injunction, which is a court order preventing a specific action, such as distribution of a potentially dangerous drug. and to be recalled, the action taken to remove a drug from the market and have it returned to the manufacturers. Other things that is more FYI for your reading, but you should be familiar with are the different laws and standards. I would bring up one called the Affordable Care Act, which is also known as Healthcare Reform, Obamacare. That's a very significant law that was passed in 2010 that extended healthcare opportunities for individuals. Close to 20 million Americans now have health insurance that would not have health insurance. And then there are state laws that, for example, regulate the licensing of how to become a pharmacy technician. And certain key terms that relate to federal law and state law is compliance, doing what is required, which is very important in terms of drug distribution and substance control, and protocol, which also can be defined as specific guidelines for practice. So there are compliance and protocol guidelines that must be followed. Let's look at liability and negligence. These are legal terms. When we talk about liability, that means that you can be prosecuted for misconduct. This is even true if you are directed to do so by a supervisor, physician, patient, customer. So misconduct does not necessarily mean that you intended to do something, but that you even actually did it. You could be guilty of misconduct by simply failing to do something that you should have done. Also, you should be familiar with the legal term negligence, which is the most common form of misconduct. And this is some of the ways that a pharmacy technician can be negligent. One, putting the wrong label onto the prescription, so you must be very careful when you're working with prescription. Not maintaining patient confidentiality, and we talked about that in relationship of HIPAA. It's the law. It's mandated. Giving a patient an expired drug. Remember, you look at the expiration date every time you are dealing with a prescription. Making calculation error. Giving a patient the wrong medication. Not handling a controlled substances properly, and then making serious mistakes or any mistake in the record keeping. So that can lead to negligent prosecution in regards to the pharmacy technician. Another thing that should be also very important is you having a code of ethics. So when we talk about ethics, this is a branch of philosophy that helps determine what should be done in principle sense, besides what must be done in compliance to the laws. Dilemmas may occur in the day-to-day activities encountered at the pharmacy when competing standards make it difficult to determine what is right to do. And this is where, as a pharmacy technician, you turn to the pharmacist to help you make those decisions. Okay. There's certain things that fall under the principles of ethics. Autonomy. Autonomy is defined patient. Well, let me elaborate on this. So the basic values of ethical consideration are the following, and there's 6 basic values that's commonly applied in ethical consideration, and definitely will be part of the aura of being a pharmacy technician, such as autonomy. Patients have a right to choose their treatment. Benefits, the action of the healthcare provider should be in the best interest of the patient. Dignity. The healthcare provider should treat the patient with dignity and respect. Non-malfeasance. The healthcare provider should have no harm in providing care. should do no harm in providing care to the patient. We heard of the Hippocratic Oath, which is do no harm. Justice, fairness, and equality should be applied when providing care to all patients. Truthfulness and honesty. Healthcare providers should be truthful and honest when providing care to the patients. Okay? So these are all things that are very important in relationship to what a pharmacy technician should do. And here on page 60, we continue to talk about ethics and compliance. There are many different review boards, such as the Institutional Review Board, or the IRB, that governs research, and there's the Federal Compliance for dealing with medications. Okay, so that concludes chapter 3. Make sure that you look at the key concepts, and one of the things that's very helpful is always looking at the self-test and the review questions.